On today's episode of the show, Louisville covered the spread against Jacksonville State. They didn't really reveal too much while doing so, but some fans have some concerns, and we'll identify and break them down on today's episode of Locked on Louisville.
You are Locked on Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on, everyone? Welcome into this special Sunday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Want to take this time to personally thank you all for making this your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked on Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off of your order. The Louisville Cardinals handled business against Jacksonville State. They covered the spread. They didn't really reveal too much while doing so, but there are some concerns, and we'll identify what those are. First off, they handle business. Mainly on the ground. 5 Cardinals scored in the rushing category. But the second quarter left some Louisville fans concerned. Were they overanalyzing? Justifiable issues? We'll break it down as we go through the duration of this post-game recap episode of the Locked on Louisville podcast. The main storyline here is that the Cardinals covered the spread against a team that they were supposed to beat by over 4 touchdowns. Now, the spread went anywhere from, I think it opened up at like 26.5, and the highest that I saw it was 28.5. And at some point, it looked like Jacksonville State was going to keep things a little close. It was a little too close for comfort in the first half. It was 28-14 after the Cardinals opened up with a 14-0 first quarter scoring advantage. Jacksonville State kind of fought back, got to within a couple of touchdowns. It was 28-14 at half, and then Louisville went on to dominate the rest of the game. The Cardinals scored in every single quarter while holding the Gamecocks to just one period of scoring in the game on Saturday. But to have covered the spread, I felt like Louisville needed to jump out early. They needed to force and win the turnover battle, and they needed to get Jacksonville State out of their rhythm. Well, they did the first thing. They opened up 14-0 in the game. They technically did win the turnover battle. It was 1-0. The Cardinals have, knock on wood, have not turned the ball over yet to start the season. They did force it was an interception in this game. And for the most part, they got Jacksonville State out of rhythm. I mean, it felt like the Gamecocks were a little bit more effective, but they were still only 2 of 12 on third down. And I know that there are some concerns about, well, what about the defense? The defense didn't really look good in the second quarter. The offense at times looked sort of bland and vanilla. What was going on? It felt like the Cardinals shouldn't have struggled with the team like they did in the first half. And I will say, yeah, I saw this from Ty Spalding, owner of Louisville Rivals. He tweeted this out after the game. And obviously I'm paraphrasing here, but that was my takeaway as well. And what he said basically was like, Louisville didn't really show much on offense or defense in terms of the playbook, and they covered. And that's the storyline here, is that, yes, was the offensive scheme, was it the most exciting? No. That's basically by design. Defensively, there weren't many stunts. There weren't many, issues. There wasn't many situations where Louisville brought, creativity when it comes to rushing the passer. For the most part, they sat back in a zone, and they utilized the size advantage that they have on both sides of the football to win the game. And I know in the second quarter, it didn't look great. I mean, I myself was sitting there like, really? That's it? There were some issues with wide receivers creating separation downfield, and a couple of those passes shut through them, and pass interferences were called, which they definitely should have been. But you didn't see Louisville open up the playbook much. But I don't think that is due to a lack of personnel. Those around the program, not in the program, around the program, have told me that, Louisville's not going to tip their hand too much in this game, in the first two games. And that's something that we sort of identified on the first couple pre-game shows, if you will, the preview series, is that we felt like Louisville was going to sort of ramp up into their offensive identity, especially when Colin Lacey gets back. And that's sort of on par with every collegiate offense, but especially one that's opening up the season with two games that they're supposed to dominate with. So the mantra or the main takeaway from this episode and from this game is that you really don't need to overanalyze a lot. Like the thing about it is that Louisville covered the spread, and they did so without having to reveal too much, neither offensively or defensively. Did it leave the Cardinals in situations in the second quarter to where you saw plays and it was like, man, they're moving the ball too easily down the field, or why is Louisville not opening up and airing the ball out? But you covered the spread, and that's really all that you can ask for. So what I'm not going to do in this game is sort of like last game, 62-0. There's really not much level for concern. But this game is a little bit different. It was 49-14. You won by 35 points, but still it wasn't as dominant as the other game. And Jacksonville State is better than Austin Peay, I would say. I feel like Louisville did what they needed to do. And that's one of those games, right, to where there's not much to gain from winning it, but you have everything to lose. So if you handle business, the only significant part of it is that you handle business. Now, granted, I will not take away the significance of getting another W in the win-loss column, because that is key, and that's what it all comes down to. But when it comes to these types of games where you're favored by, let's say, double digits, let's say over 20 points, you're supposed to handle business. And when there's situations to where the opposition gets yardage or they score a little easier than they're supposed to, yeah, there's going to be some issues. Like, am I worried about Louisville defending the running quarterback? Yes. Am I worried about Louisville getting consistent pass rush? Not really. I don't feel like Louisville revealed many of their stunts. Like, they are keeping Georgia Tech as in the dark as they possibly can as it relates to, what you're going to see from this Louisville team. And that's the way it should be. You're going to be 4 weeks into the season. Louisville really hasn't put many, they haven't showed their hand to the rest of their schedule. So, but there is, this season particularly, there's a newfound appreciation for teams, especially ranked teams, handling business against teams that they're supposed to. I mean, look at college football this week in general. It was a rather forgetful week for college football, right? I mean, you look down the line at ranked teams. For the most part, in the fourth quarter, Alabama was right there with South Florida. Now, I know that the Crimson Tide ended up winning that game big time. Notre Dame lost at home to Northern Illinois. They were over 30-point favorites in that game. Oregon barely beat Boise State 37-34 at home. Penn State at home, 7-point win over Bowling Green. I mean, you go down the line. Oklahoma 16-12 over Houston that got demolished in the first game of the season. Oklahoma State barely beat an Arkansas team. That's a little bit of a different situation, but Kansas State squeaked out a win on the road against Tulane. Illinois beat Kansas at home. Arizona 22-10 against Northern Arizona. Iowa State beat a ranked Iowa team. Georgia Tech lost to Syracuse. So overall, this was not a good week for ranked teams whatsoever. And it makes me appreciate the fact that since the Cardinals have joined the ACC, yes, there have been a couple games that they've lost that they shouldn't have, but most of those games, and I would say the vast majority, probably 99% of those games, are two conference opponents. Like Louisville, since joining the ACC, one thing that I will give them is that when it comes to FBS mid-major teams and FCS teams that they play that they're supposed to beat by double digits, most of the time, if not every time, they handle business. And I know that that should be a given, but we're being reminded every single week, almost every ranked game, that that's not always the case. So I hate to be that guy, like the whole, well, what about this? Yeah, you might have some concerns, but what about that? And I'm not trying to, poke holes at any concerns or anything like that. But I'm looking at this game. Louisville handles Jacksonville State. They cover the spread. They win 49-14. The takeaway here is that I'm not going to get too high nor too low. And that's should be the status of where you're at mentally regarding this team heading into Georgia Tech after the bye week. You've won 2 games by blowout fashion, covering the spread each time. That's all you can ask for. Is it going to be a perfect game every week out, every weekend, week out? No, that's not going to be the case. But Louisville did what they needed to do. Now, there are some concerns that I watched the game and I was like, that's got to get better. We'll discuss in the final segment. But before we do that, let's talk about what went right. That was the Cardinals' rushing attack. 5 different Cardinals found the end zone via the ground game. We'll break what helped the Cardinals coming up in the next segment of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. 5-Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you're into a long list of stuff to do before work or you have a list of do-it-yourself projects to take on at home, take a 5-Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off of your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects for the house. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore. Personally, my favorite is grape and berry. I am starting to come around to tropical burst. They also have watermelon and much more. There's a flavor for everyone. On the site, you have even the option to build a 12 or a 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders either. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. And heading into the second segment of this special Sunday postgame recap episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Once again, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Louisville scored 49 points on Saturday. A lot of that was due to the Cardinals' ground game efforts. As I mentioned, 5 Cardinals found the end zone from the ground. Maurice Turner was the leader, 12 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown. Duke Watson had 4 for 51 and a touchdown. Kewan Brown, 5 for 51 and a touchdown. Don Chaney Jr. started out the game with the game's opening touchdown, 3 for 21 in the touchdown. And Dwayne Martin, fullback, 1 carry, 2 yards, and a touchdown in this one. The Cardinals would rush the ball for 35 attempts, 234 yards, and 5 scores. The longest was a 40-yard carry by Duke Watson. Louisville ended up averaging 6.7 yards per carry on the ground. And some were wondering, why is Louisville running the ball so much? Why? Well, you told us on the show, Dalton, that we're going to see an offense that throws the ball more. A lot of it was personnel last year with Jack Plummer. You've got a better quarterback. Why is Louisville still focusing on running the football? The simple answer is because they can. And that's as far as the answer will go. As I mentioned, what I say, Louisville didn't really tip their hand in terms of the offensive playbook. Will there be a time where they ask Tyler Shuck to air the ball out? 100%. There will be. Louisville will have to throw the ball at some point this season in a high capacity. And you're going to see that. I mean, Tyler Shuck, it's not like he averaged like 7 throws a game the past 2 games. Like, he was 21 of 33, 349 yards and 2 touchdowns. He averaged 10.6 yards per completion. It's not like they didn't throw the ball. But like I said, Louisville basically, I hate to say it like this, but it's true. Louisville entered this game in cruise control and never felt like they needed to break and readjust the pedal to get the speed where it needed to be. Like, they stayed in cruise control. And even when things got a little interesting in the second quarter, they made the adjustments in the third quarter and second half in general, and they took care of business. So, and not to mention, you look at the scheme that Rich Rodriguez deployed on defense. It was pretty much, for the most part, like a 3-3-5 defense. And Jacksonville State, they didn't have the same size that Louisville had in the trenches. Like, Louisville had more size and athleticism and speed, and they play more defensive backs. So instinctively, in a 3-3-5 package where you have more players in the secondary, you're going to get more on the ground. And Louisville took advantage of that. Louisville said, okay, if you're going to give us 6.7 yards per carry, we're going to run the ball all damn game. And if you don't stop it, we're going to keep doing it. That's what happened in the game against Austin Peay. And yes, do you want to see Louisville air the ball out? Sure. I mean, you want to see an exciting offense, but you're still scoring 49 points. Like, Louisville is being effective. Tyler Shuck took some risks. He missed some wide open guys in this game, especially in the second quarter. But for the most part, he was solid. Like, he wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. Like, he did what he needed to do to win a game. And that's all you can ask for him or from him in this type of a situation where you're favored to win by pretty much 30 points. So I'm not really worried, because I kind of expected this, and that's sort of the situation. Is if it's not broken, don't fix it. Like, if you're running the ball and it's chunk yardage, you're continually extending plays, who cares? Like, I understand things happen. Like, 100 things can go right, and then one thing goes wrong, and everybody goes up into arms. Like, I also am a victim of that sometimes. Like, I will watch Louisville do so many great things, and then a receiver will drop a pass, or a guy, doesn't go through the right gap, or the quarterback misses a read, and I'm like, dude, come on. Why is this so difficult? And then I look back and I'm like, oh, we're winning by 35 points. So I understand. Look, it's easy to be concerned about things sometimes when things aren't perfect. But again, you won by 35 points. You ran for 230 yards on the ground, and 5 different running backs ran it in. And that's not to mention Isaac Brown, who probably should have scored. He was pretty close. He had 8 for 43 in this one. So I'm okay with it. I mean, at the end of the day, there will come a time where Louisville will need to throw the ball more, and they'll do that. Louisville will open this playbook up, mark my words. When Colin Lacey gets back, you're going to see the Cardinals get more electric in terms of the skill positions. One thing that I will say is that Jeff Brom mentioned that Don Chaney Jr. had sustained a high ankle sprain, I believe, in this game. So that's something to focus on. Thankfully, Louisville does have a bye week coming up. So, like I said, early injuries, you're able to sort of nurse things, right? But having an injury right now is kind of tough at the moment. We'll see what his status is moving forward. I'm not sure that a timeline has been brought up yet. I know that high ankle sprains can be annoying to deal with. They linger, right? So we'll see what that means for him. He really hasn't got much run. Didn't really need him against Austin Peay. He didn't have a carry. Looked good in that first drive against Jacksonville State, and sustained that ankle sprain. So will it make him miss time? That's still to be determined. That's why you give reps to guys like Isaac and Kewan Brown. Kewan Brown was probably the most impressive runner. He was 5 for 51. He looked really, really good. Duke Watson did as well. Maurice Turner did the job, and Isaac Brown solid. So it's next man up if he's having to miss any amount of time. But at this point, I'm really not worried moving forward about him, right? So, moving forward, I'm not really worried about them. Hopefully, Don doesn't have to miss much time at all. So we'll definitely keep a close eye out on that. But look, Cards handle business. That's the headline here. They did it by running the football. Jacksonville State couldn't stop it. Why break what doesn't need? I can't speak. Why fix what doesn't? I can't do it again. Why fix what's not broken? There we go. Why is that so difficult to say? I've only said it 7 times this episode. When we come back, we're going to break down that second quarter. We're going to get to some of the concerns. Some of them I see some merit in. Others, just let it work out. And we'll break those down coming up in the final segment of Locked on Louisville. Today's episode of the show also brought to you by Ibotta. It's the fall time. Bonfire season. Stock up on all of your campfire favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time that you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries, supplies, even toys. You can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners they're offering $5 just for trying it by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and start using the code, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. And into the final segment of this special Sunday edition, post-game recap of the Louisville win over Jacksonville State 49-14. Drop your favorite moment or MVP of the game in the YouTube comments below. They're coming up in the next couple of episodes. We will start the question of the day. And that's going to be something that we can use to kind of spark some conversation amongst the YouTube comments. There was also a listener, I forget who it was. I'll have to go back and remember the name, but I apologize. A listener from France, a listener from Okinawa, Japan. So really, really cool to see that the Louisville fandom, Card Nation, is global. But thank you all for tuning in and making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Second quarter was iffy. Both teams scored 14 points. I think for starters, just the penalties, like overall for the game, Louisville had 5 penalties for 42 yards, and the majority of those came in that second quarter. I felt like it was sloppy on the defensive end. Pass interferences, holding on the defense could have gotten Louisville off the field. Overall, just not great from a controlled standpoint, from a discipline standpoint. Some penalties there, some missed tackles also. Look, the quarterback, shout out to Tyler Huff for his toughness. He had 18 carries for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. I would usually say that this is not an issue if all last season the Cardinals didn't struggle with a running quarterback. The next quarterback that the Cardinals will play is Georgia Tech's Haynes King. Ran all over Louisville in that first matchup last season. He's going to try to do that this year. So you have to implement a spy. I think you have to go to man and just deliver more pressure. Jacksonville State moved the ball down the field at will, pretty much 3 straight possessions. Thankfully, they missed a field goal in one. Thankfully, a weird situation where it looked like the Jacksonville State dude had a catch and just stumbled and fell, and I guess they ruled it incomplete after the review, which was really, really weird. But for the most part, the whole second quarter, the Gamecocks were able to move the ball down the field, the run-pass options. He was able to find open guys. Overall, like, the passing wasn't really the greatest. I mean, 17 of 28, 160 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Like, it's not like they just absolutely dissected the Louisville defense. So I'm not really worried about that. Like, Louisville was in zone for the most part, and then they adjusted in the second half and put up a 0. So that should be the main storyline, is that they learned from the mistakes and they adjusted. So I think more often than not, I would like to see Louisville in man coverage where they're bringing more pressure. And I think that that's going to help the pass rush get home rather than in that zone shell. It's pretty obvious that when the pass rush doesn't get home in the zone, guys get open all the time. So I know NCAA CFB 25, you have to run a zone defense to be successful on defense. That's not necessarily the case in real life. So I would like to see the defense play more man. I think that you have the athletes with Quincy Riley, MJ Griffin, some of the other defensive backs, Tamari McDonald, that can go one-on-one with these receivers and succeed at a high rate. You have one of, if not the best cornerback in the ACC and the country as a whole. So not really worried about the passing aspect of this, but there is some definite concern about defending maybe not even the running quarterback, but the quarterback that decides to get out and run. Because one common denominator of last year is that no matter what, Louisville just couldn't contain a quarterback. Haynes King did what he did. Now they, for the most part, contain Thomas Castellanos. They'll have to do it again coming up here in about a month. Anthony Calandria tore Louisville apart in November. Yeah, in November. Tyler Van Dyke did to an extent, even Devin Leary, Miller Moss, the list goes on. So I don't know what needs to happen if you need to put a spy toward the line of scrimmage on a quarterback. Like, you have some pretty mobile quarterbacks that you're going to go up against this season. You'll have Anthony Calandria. You'll have Thomas Castellanos, Cam Ward. My goodness, that's going to be tough. Haynes King. He can't throw the ball, but Brock Vandegrift can surely, or he tries to run. And then some other quarterbacks that you'll have to go up against. So ultimately, some of the concerns, like if you didn't win by 35 points, maybe you don't overlook them as much. But with the playbook, I mean, Louisville didn't really show as many pass rushing stunts. It's like I said, they went on autopilot. They put things in cruise control, and they basically let the sheer advantage in talent and size work to your advantage. And it did. I mean, Louisville wore the Gamecocks down in the line of scrimmage, or in the trenches at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. So if you're learning from something, it's just staying disciplined, eliminating the penalties, containing the quarterback is the number one thing. Because I know that, hey, look, you won by 35, but Tyler Huff going for 101 yards, and he did so effortlessly some points. That's something that has to get better. And that is probably the number one concern that I have for this defense, is even if you go into man and you bring the pressure, can Louisville's linebackers be in position to where they not only can put themselves in a position to make a play and stop a quarterback, but also bring the quarterback down, because missing tackles has been another issue at times. So it's going to be on guys like TJ Quinn, like Ben Perry, Stanquan Clark, Geronte Davis, TJ Capers. The list goes on that you have to force in there and really be able to defend the opposing quarterback. So you'll have the week off, right? You'll get healthy. You'll get rested up, and you'll start to focus on a Georgia Tech team that's coming off of a pretty weird loss to Syracuse. Like, that was going to be one of the measuring stick games for the Yellow Jackets, and they didn't pass the test. So does my perception of Georgia Tech change? It does. But truthfully, I'm still trying to decipher what exactly that means. So there will be some talk this week about where the ACC sits, right? You know, we'll have the sort of focus on the conference as a whole. But ultimately, Louisville is in a very, very good spot starting conference play to really be able to make some noise and attempt to get back to Charlotte for the second straight season. So that is going to wrap up this post-game recap of the Locked On Louisville podcast. We'll be with you right back on Monday to be able to break that matchup down a little bit more and discuss some more. But that's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Everyone have a great end to the weekend. We'll see you right back here